How many times can one team shoot itself in the foot before it realizes it's out of bullets? That's the question Atlanta Falcons fans are asking themselves this morning after watching their team get systematically dismantled by the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday night. This wasn't just a loss, it was a masterclass in how experience, coaching, and execution can expose every crack in a team's foundation. The Falcons had their shot, their moment under the bright lights, to prove they belonged in the conversation with the NFC's elite. Instead, they looked like a team still figuring out who they are, and that's a terrifying realization 6 weeks into the season. What makes this defeat so bitter is the opportunity it represented. Back-to-back primetime games against playoff contenders? That's your chance to make a statement, to announce your arrival, to show the entire league that Atlanta is back. They got one win. They needed two. And the reasons they came up short tell us everything we need to know about where this team really stands. The third-string tackle finally shows his ugly side. Let's start with the offensive line, because that's where this game began to unravel. When Caleb McGarry went down with a season-ending injury just before Week 1, there was genuine panic in Atlanta. Losing your starting right tackle is bad enough, but then backup Storm Norton needed ankle surgery, and suddenly the Falcons were staring at a depth chart nightmare. Enter Elijah Wilkinson, a veteran third-stringer who was supposed to be an emergency option at best. Here's the thing, though. For the first 5 games, Wilkinson was actually solid. Not spectacular, not Pro Bowl-worthy, but competent. He did his job, kept Michael Penix Jr. relatively clean, and became almost invisible, which for an offensive lineman is the highest compliment you can give. The fact that nobody was talking about him before games meant he was doing exactly what he needed to do. Sunday night was a different story entirely. Wilkinson got absolutely torched. We're talking complete and utter exposure. The kind of performance that makes offensive line coaches wake up in cold sweats. The 49ers' pass rush came through his side of the line like it was a revolving door, generating what felt like 1,000,000 yards of pressure and culminating in a crucial fumble just before halftime that completely shifted the game's momentum. One bad game doesn't define a player, and it's not like the Falcons have better options sitting on the bench waiting for their opportunity. But this is a problem that can't be ignored. If Wilkinson continues to struggle in pass protection, Atlanta might have to get creative. Maybe sliding players around, maybe bringing in outside help, maybe just accepting that this is a weakness opponents will continue to exploit. None of those options are particularly appealing, but doing nothing while your quarterback gets demolished isn't a viable strategy either. The Falcons' rush defense falters when it matters most now. Let's talk about what happened on the other side of the ball, because the defensive performance was equally concerning. The 49ers came into this game with a simple, almost brutally straightforward game plan. Run the football and control the clock. No tricks, no gimmicks, just old school, physical football that dared Atlanta to stop them. San Francisco racked up 174 rushing yards on 39 carries, methodically grinding down the Falcons' defense and limiting Atlanta to just 9 offensive possessions for the entire game. Think about that for a second. 9 possessions in a full 60-minute football game. The Falcons' offense barely got to touch the ball because their defense couldn't get off the field. This is particularly frustrating because Atlanta's defense has been one of the feel-good stories of the season. Under Jeff Ulbrich's guidance, they've transformed from one of the league's worst units into a genuinely respectable group. The improvement has been remarkable, the kind of turnaround that gets coordinators' head coaching interviews. But if there's one glaring weakness that's been exposed through 6 weeks, it's their vulnerability against the run, especially against teams with creative rushing attacks like the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan's offense is famous for its zone running schemes, its misdirection, its ability to create running lanes through scheme rather than just overpowering opponents. The Falcons knew this was coming. They had all week to prepare, and they still couldn't stop it. That's not a talent issue. That's a fundamental problem with either the game plan or the execution, and neither answer is particularly comforting. Here's where we need to have an uncomfortable conversation about the coaching staff. In terms of pure coaching ability and game management, the Atlanta Falcons seem to be at a disadvantage almost every single week, and Sunday night was no exception. This isn't about effort or preparation. It's about experience, creativity, and the ability to make crucial in-game adjustments. Kyle Shanahan is one of the best defensive minds in football. He took the players he had available, and let's be honest, the 49ers were dealing with their own injury issues and crafted a game plan that perfectly accentuated their strengths while attacking Atlanta's weaknesses. It was coaching at its finest, a chess match where Shanahan was thinking 3 moves ahead the entire night. Meanwhile, on the Atlanta sideline, things were considerably less impressive. The most egregious example? Having only 10 men on the field during the most critical defensive play of the game. 10 men. In a prime-time game against a playoff contender, with the season potentially hanging in the balance, the Falcons couldn't get 11 players on the field. That's not a talent issue, that's a fundamental organizational failure. And the offensive play calling continues to leave a lot to be desired. There's talent all over that offense, skill position players who can make plays, a quarterback with a cannon for an arm, but the scheme isn't putting them in positions to succeed consistently. Too often, the play calling feels predictable, conservative, lacking the creativity that defines the league's best offenses. Head coach Raheem Morris has plenty of positive qualities, but in a league where margins are razor-thin and every decision matters, he continues to cost the Falcons crucial moments that could be the difference between making the playoffs and watching from home. Atlanta has enough talent on both sides of the ball to be a legitimate contender, but talent alone doesn't win championships. You need coaching that maximizes that talent, and right now, that's not happening consistently enough. An inconsistent Michael Penix Jr. Now, we arrive at the elephant in the room, the conversation nobody in Atlanta really wants to have, but needs to happen. Michael Penix Jr. hasn't done enough through 6 games to prove he's the long-term answer at quarterback. Before the pitchforks come out, let's be clear about something. There are absolutely flashes of brilliance. The arm talent is otherworldly, the kind of natural ability that can't be taught. When Penix is on, when he's seeing the field clearly and delivering strikes, you can see why Atlanta was so excited about his potential. Those moments are real, and they're tantalizing. But the inconsistency is equally real, and it's becoming a problem. His accuracy fluctuates wildly from throw to throw. His ability to read defenses and make pre-snap adjustments is still developing. He holds onto the ball too long at times, takes unnecessary sacks, and makes decisions that leave you scratching your head wondering what he was seeing. None of this is particularly unusual for young quarterbacks. In fact, it's completely normal. The transition from college to the NFL is brutal, and expecting a rookie to come in and immediately play at a Pro Bowl level is unrealistic. But here's the issue. The Falcons don't have the luxury of a typical development timeline. They're trying to compete now with a roster built to win immediately, and through 6 weeks, Penix has held the team back more often than he's elevated the talent around him. That's a harsh reality, but it's an honest one. There have been games where the offense has stalled because Penix couldn't make the throws that needed to be made. There have been drives that ended in punts because he couldn't read the coverage correctly. And in a league where quarterback play is the single most important factor in winning and losing, that's a massive problem. The question facing Atlanta is whether they have the patience to let Penix develop at his own pace, accepting that there will be growing pains and losses along the way, or whether they need to consider making a change to maximize their current window of contention. Neither answer is particularly appealing, but pretending the problem doesn't exist isn't a viable strategy. What this loss really means for Atlanta, so where does this leave the Falcons? At 3-3, they're not out of the playoff race by any means. The NFC is wide open, and there's still plenty of time to turn things around. But this loss exposed some fundamental issues that can't be fixed with a few adjustments or a motivational speech. The offensive line depth is a legitimate concern that will continue to be exploited by good defensive coordinators. The run defense has a glaring weakness that teams will attack relentlessly. The coaching staff is getting outmaneuvered by more experienced opponents. And the quarterback play is inconsistent at best. These aren't minor issues that can be papered over with a couple of wins against weak opponents. These are structural problems that require serious attention and potentially difficult decisions. The talent is there, that's not in question. But talent alone doesn't win in the NFL. You need execution, coaching, consistency, and a little bit of luck. Right now, Atlanta is coming up short in too many of those areas. The season isn't over, not by a long shot. But the margin for error just got a whole lot smaller. The Falcons needed to prove they belonged in the conversation with the NFC's best teams, and instead, they proved they still have a long way to go. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially after the optimism that was building following their previous primetime victory. The good news? It's still early. 6 games into a 17-game season means there's plenty of time to address these issues and make a playoff push. But time has a way of disappearing quickly in the NFL, and problems that seem manageable in October can become insurmountable by December. Atlanta needs to figure out their offensive line situation before Penix gets seriously injured. They need to shore up their run defense before every opponent decides to just pound the ball down their throats. They need the coaching staff to elevate their game and stop getting outmaneuvered by more experienced opponents. And they need Penix to accelerate his development and start playing like the franchise quarterback they hope he can become. That's a lot of needs and not a lot of time to address them. But that's the reality facing the Falcons as they try to salvage their season and prove that Sunday night's loss was an aberration rather than a true reflection of who they are as a team. So what do you think? Are the Falcons' issues fixable, or did Sunday night reveal fundamental problems that will haunt them all season? Can Michael Penix Jr. develop fast enough to lead this team to the playoffs, or is Atlanta wasting a talented roster with inconsistent quarterback play? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear where you stand on this team's chances. And if this breakdown gave you something to think about, show some love with a like, and let's keep this conversation going. The Falcons' season isn't over yet, but the clock is definitely ticking.